This video is going to be about ways to collect data and some of the problems that happen when you collect data. So first we're going to talk about the differences between observational studies and experimental studies. Okay, I wrote a bunch of words down here under experimental studies that I want to go over with you. I didn't write anything under observational studies because there's not a whole lot to write. So an observational study is just what it sounds like. It's when you literally just observe what's going on and you write down what's happening, what's causing things to happen, but you're not actually doing anything to affect anything. So there's no treatments being given. There's no interacting with the subjects at all. It's literally just watching to see what happens. It's observing. Just put down the word watching, and you don't do anything with it. There's no treatments, okay? Whereas in the experimental study, there's all kinds of things that happen. We have experimental studies that are called single blind and double blind. Okay, let me explain the difference between those first. A single blind, first of all, an experimental study is where you will be providing some sort of treatment and you're trying to figure out if that treatment works. Maybe it's a fertilizer for some plants, maybe it's a medication for people. Who knows? Whatever it is that we're trying to test and see if it works, we would do an experimental study. We would break the group of people or plants or whatever we're studying it on into groups. And we would have a control group and we would have non-control groups. We would have control groups and an active control group, actually. The control group or active control group is the group that would get the medication, the fertilizer, whatever it is you're trying to test and see if it made a difference. Okay, the control group gets that. Everybody else in the non-active control groups gets what's called a placebo. And a placebo is just like a sugar pill. It's a fake treatment. Okay, so we got two treatments. We got two different groups. You give the real treatment that you're trying to test to the control group called the active control group. The other control group gets the placebo, which is a fake treatment. Okay, you do the study and then you test them at the end to see if the medication that you gave made any difference. Now, a single blind means that only the doctor or experimenter knows what's going on. A double blind means nobody knows what's going on. Neither the doctor nor the patient knows whether the person got the placebo or the real pill in a double blind. In a single blind, the doctor will know who got what, but the patient will not know. Double blind, nobody knows, okay? You have to be careful with some of this stuff because you may end up observing or finding out through the experimental study that there could be things called confounding or lurking variables. In other words, you may find something that you didn't expect to find. Maybe the medication is actually lowering the people's cholesterol, but maybe what you didn't know is that they also went on a cholesterol reducing diet that you didn't know about. So they were eating foods that would do that naturally. Now, that could be told in an observational study if you don't give them any medication at all and you just have them change telling them to change their diet would now be an experimental study. So you just take a bunch of different people and you just observe what they eat and what it does to their cholesterol. And then down here, you would take the people with the high cholesterol, give them a medication, and give other people a placebo, and you see which one will lower the cholesterol. Now, like I said, there may be what are called confounding or lurking variables. Maybe there's something else going on. Maybe the person who continuously has this high cholesterol, even after the medication, has a family history of it. And that's a lurking variable that can't be discovered by doing the experiment. You can't discover that my mom, for example, has a 300 cholesterol and that my dad had a 290 cholesterol. You can't discover that unless you know that from me. So my cholesterol's high because of the lurking variable of my parents. It's hereditary. So doing any kind of experiment on me is not going to make any difference. I have to be on the high cholesterol medication regardless because of that lurking variable. So you have to be careful in all of these. But basically, an experimental experimental study will establish a cause and effect. I gave the medication and this was the effect. Okay, now that's the difference between those. This is kind of long. There's a lot to go through here, but that's okay. This is just a general statement that you should read more about. You should always be watching all of your videos from Annandale. They may be a little outdated and a little cheesy, but they give really good information that I want you to know. And one of the things is just some vocabulary. You're going to hear about what are called parameters. Parameters describe populations. Populations are big, like the whole population of the United States. You want to find out something about that? You cannot ask everybody in the United States. So you would have to break it down into samples, and you would have to survey or give a questionnaire or something to a sample of people. And the data that we gather from the sample is called statistics, but the data we gather from populations is called parameters. We're going to talk about that more later, and it's a little weird, but I wanted to throw it out there now so you get used to it. It's easy to remember because parameter and population are both P's, statistics and samples are both S's. So just remember, P goes with P, S goes with S. Parameter, population, statistics, sample. Okay, we'll come back to that later. It'll make sense as you go through your assignments. All right, now, we obviously talked about observational study and experiments. Those are completely different than doing some sort of a study where you send out a survey or you ask people to call in. You're collecting data in different ways. And these are the 5 most popular ways to do surveys, and we are going to only talk about these 5. Any others are not in this class. So that's just it. So SRS stands for Simple Random Sample. The key to a simple random sample is everyone has to have an equally likely chance of being picked. Equally likely. That's important. A way to do a simple random sample at a school, let's say we wanted to survey our students and we put every single person's name, I'm going to say, into a hat and drew one out, but it'd be more likely that we would just take a spreadsheet of all the students enrolled in the school and just do a random picking of 5 people. Just where eeny, meeny, miny, mo, whatever, you just pick 5 people. Everyone has an equally likely chance. You randomly draw 5 people from a list. Okay. Now, stratified is different. Stratified is where you take your sample and you break it up proportionally equal to the population. Okay, here's what I mean. Let's say that in the population of a school, the whole school, we've got, let's say we've got 175 freshmen, 150 sophomores, 162 juniors, and 148 seniors. Let's say that's what we had, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to calculate the percentage of the population that each one of these represents, and then we're going to do a sample in the same percentages. Okay, so grab my calculator here so I can calculate these percentages. We are going to add it up to get our total number of people. So we've got 175 plus 150 plus 162 plus 148 is 635 students. And then 175 of those are freshmen. So 175 divided by 635 is 27%. 150 divided by 635 is 24%. These aren't going to be that different where it's not going to make a huge difference in our sampling, but I'm still showing you what to do. Then I divide my 162, my juniors, divided by my total, it's 26%, and then 32% for the seniors. Whoops, 148. 148 divided by 635 is 23%, I meant. Then I need to make sure these add up to 100. And I didn't round too much or too little. So 27% plus 24 plus 26 plus 23. Yep, that adds up to 100%. Don't think you can see this. Okay, so I just added up my total. Then I got each amount divided by the total, got my percentages. Now, because these are pretty close, it's not really going to make a difference, but you want to design where you've got 23% of the people you choose in your experiment are seniors, 26% of the people you choose are juniors, 24 are sophomores, and 27% are freshmen. And that way the sample matches what you had in the population. Okay, now just maybe an easier way would be to make it so that it's much different, where you calculated out and you found out that 10%, the groups of people that you have to look at represented these populations. Sorry, my marker is being kind of icky and you can't really see it very well. Let's say 20%, 40%, 10%, and 30%. Now those are going to be quite different, where if you had 10% of your population was whatever, 40% was whatever, 20% was whatever, and 30% was whatever, then you would want to have your sample matching those percents so that your sample represents your population. That's called stratified. Convenience sampling is just what it sounds like. You survey who's convenient. Okay. SRS, equally likely. Stratified, they're proportional to the population. Convenience, you survey who's convenient. You want to know what people think of the lunch program in your school? You stand outside the cafeteria and you ask people on their way in or on their way out about how they feel about lunch. You ask people about reading habits, and you stand outside of a bookstore and you ask people going in and out of a bookstore about their reading habits. You go to the local mall and you ask whoever's coming in and out of certain stores what they think of whatever. You ask people coming out of a sports store what they think of different sports things, because if they're in a sports store, they probably know about sports. So that's convenience. I could keep going on forever, but you're just asking who's convenient. You can see that there's probably going to be a lot of bias in that, which we'll talk about in a minute. The next one is called systemic. That's where you decide how often you want to ask somebody, and you ask every nth person. So you're going to stand outside the mall and you're going to ask every 10th person that comes out. You're going to ask them your question. You're going to sit at the stoplight, and every 5th car that stops at a red light, you're going to ask them to roll down their window and ask a question. Probably not a good idea. That might be kind of dangerous. I take that back. Let's not do that. Let's not ask strangers at a stop sign. But you know what I mean? You're asking you're picking every 4th person off of a list of people. You're not doing it randomly. You're picking it every nth. That's called systemic. Next would be cluster. That would be something like, let's say that we're going to ask people about the noise level in a hotel. And we ask everybody in the 1st and 3rd floors in the main part of the building. And then we ask everybody on the 2nd and 4th floors in the outer part of the building. Let's say there's, a hotel that's maybe shaped like that. And so we ask the 1st and 3rd floor here, and we ask the 2nd and 4th floor here. So you're getting different areas of the hotel. That would be a cluster. You ask all the people on these floors, and you're getting different representations based on the different places in the hotel that may have different kinds of noise. So it depends on your situation, what kind of a collection data you want to do. Cluster would be maybe clustering all the middle school kids together and asking them, and clustering all the high school kids together and asking them. Okay, the last two, I don't know if you can see them very well, but they are voluntary, which is self-explanatory. You just ask a survey and you see who gives you back the answers. You put it out to everybody. I put out a survey to everybody in my class. Like at the end of this semester, you will get a survey on what you thought of me as a teacher. And then everybody has an opportunity to choose, but only those who feel like doing it will do it. And we hope that we get a lot of people who fill out our surveys, but we'll just take what we get. And the last one, it got kind of erased, but it says multi-stage. That just means that you're going to use more than one of these. Maybe you have a great big population. You decide to do an SRS to get people narrowed down equally, and then you break them into stratified groups or whatever. It just means that you're doing it more than one way. Okay, now, the last thing we're going to talk about in this is bias. Bias just means that you can tell that somehow these answers were not what you predicted. They may be swayed one way or the other. Okay, so we've got some important biases. And there's a lot more biases than this, but these are the ones we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about over and under coverage. That just means, like, for example, in a voluntary, you could have way too many people responding. And the problem with voluntary surveys are going to be stuff like, if it's an internet survey, only people who get access to internet are going to be able to answer that survey. So you would have under coverage because not everybody's going to be able to answer it. You have a telephone survey that calls into a landline and says, answer these questions. Well, most people don't even have landlines anymore. So if they're only calling you on a landline, asking you your political questions or whatever, you're risking undercoverage because so many people don't even have landlines. You ask a question, a voluntary response, write in and tell what you think about this political assassination. You could have a lot of overcoverage because people who are very passionate about something one way or the other are going to call in. They're going to call into the radio show and say how terrible they think this or that or the other thing is because they're passionate about it. And then you're going to get a lot of over coverage one way or the other, very violently against abortion, against gun control, against using vaccines. They're going to call in. That's going to be over coverage in that direction. People who want gun control, people who support the Second Amendment, who support guns, who support freedom of religion, who support these things, they're going to have over coverage in that direction. So we get one way or the other, over coverage, under coverage, depending if it's voluntary survey or if it's using modem like internet or telephone where not everybody has access. Leading question is just that. You pose the question in a way that will sway people. Let's say something like, what do you think about texting and driving? Okay, now, everyone knows texting and driving is wrong. You know that. If I ask you flat out, do you text and drive? 99% of the people are going to say no, whether they do it or not. Why? Because it's called leading question. Nope, that's not leading question. I screwed up on that. That is called something else. I am trying to talk about leading questions, so let's come back to that one. Leading question is something like, what do you think about our new stupid math curriculum? Well, now people are going to say, well, it's a stupid math curriculum, so I don't like it. It's dumb. I could also say, what do you think about that awesome new teacher that we have? Well, then you're probably going to say, well, I think she's great because I already led you into saying, leading you to think one way or the other what it should be. What about these stupid laws that make you do XYZ? Well, that's probably going to lead a person into saying that one way or the other. So you're leading that question. Okay, another bias is called selection bias, and that is where you only select people that are going to answer a question the way you think you're going to ask. You only ask your friends what they think about something. You only ask people in your political party what they think of a candidate against or for. You only ask people that are going to agree or disagree with you so that you get answers the way you want them. Non-response is kind of like under coverage. You just don't get enough people to respond. When you have a survey, you do want to have enough data. You want to have a large enough sample space that it's going to be reliable. So if you don't have a big enough sample space, that's going to also give you a lot of bias. You just need to make sure that you have not worded your questions in any way to lead them. You have not picked only your friends. You have thought about how you're going to gather your data so you don't get over under coverage bias and that you don't get people not responding. Okay. Now that is all of the fun biases that we talk about. And if there are others that I forgot, then I will put them in the homepage. So there you go.